Hey everyone, there was a lot of terms this week that I thought, just because the reading was kind of extensive, I liked it all, and I really wasn't sure how to compress everything into 3 or 4 minutes, and hopefully I won't go over too long, but I'll try to do my best. The top three for me this week were the obvious. Can't skip over the obvious. Disaster, it's the content of the course, it's what we need to understand, and I'm hoping my understanding will better develop as we go along. There were a lot of different definitions, in the PowerPoint especially. For me, I just kind of interpret it as something that's sudden and unexpected that can disrupt human life or cause loss, more specifically, in human life, environmentally, or economically. And with understanding what disaster is, I think we should understand what hazards can be that to cause disasters, particularly natural or weather-related, biological, technological, or man-made. I hadn't really thought about, of course, the obvious stands out on weather-related and that kind of thing, but I hadn't thought about biological. Knock on wood, we haven't had to face that too much in our generation. I hope we don't have to. The CDC seems to keep that under control pretty well. But it made me wonder, as I had written down vulnerability for my other definition that was super important. You know, we often think that people in poverty are the most vulnerable, and they are for sure, but wouldn't we all be pretty vulnerable if something like a disease or an epidemic broke out? I think we would be, I guess, depending on the type of disease, but so that kind of made me scratch my head a little. But I mean, to be vulnerable, you think someone that can't cope or doesn't expect or anticipate a disaster or can't recover or recuperate from it. I think those are a great way to describe it, but then I started thinking, to be vulnerable, and this is kind of where I'm a little muddy. Maybe it's just a question, but I feel like it's a little bit muddy. To be vulnerable, I wondered, even if the most educated person in disaster or policing or, anything like that, what if they're in a building and there's an earthquake, for instance, and they don't know where the exits are? To me, that means they're vulnerable, because they're in a situation that they can't escape from or find their way out. I just wondered if vulnerability in the true sense of what we're talking about, would that make that person vulnerable? I also had a couple of, well, I don't have enough time, but issue framing, I was a little confused if that meant, obviously the words we use to describe an issue, but I mean, does that mean that it's a way to describe an event or something that has happened disaster related, or is it how the media, for instance, covers an issue and how they frame their words? I wasn't really sure on that. Pretty muddy, if you can tell. And I also had a question. My question would be, after reading the definitions of disaster in Module 2, what's the most significant disaster of your generation? What makes it significant to you, i.e., why did you rank it above others? So like, what stood out to you? Why did it, for me, it's 9/11, just because, I mean, there's unfortunately several disasters I've seen. Hurricane Katrina, I lived down in the South and had lost my home to a hurricane. So, but for me, 9/11, just, the impact of someone else causing so much physical and human loss was tragedy, and unfortunately I remember exactly where I was when that happened. Anyway, I'm running over my time here, but I'm looking forward to hearing your questions and seeing your videos, and hope you have a great week. Thanks.